Well, ladies and gentlemen, another day in Reto Dunstan. And before we look at the news, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to support the work that I do here, you're welcome to buy me a coffee. So let's get straight into the news and look to see what's actually going on in Reto Dunstan today. Now, this is the first news story that Donald Trump has now delivered his letter to South Africa announcing a 30% tariff on imports from South Africa. Now, we were expecting this letter. We knew that trade tariffs were coming. And primarily, this move will target aluminium and steel, but may be expanded. Now, the decision to issue the letter follows the South Africa BRICS alignment, the BRICS Summit, which I covered in a video, and the BRICS aligned parties issued a statement basically criticizing the US foreign policy and its actions against Iran. Now, the US claims that the actual tariffs are to protect national interests and punish hostile economic behavior, of which many of these countries are colluding to undermine what they class as U.S. supremacy. But in any case, it's very curious to note that the actual party that should have responded to the allegation that they were all going to get an additional tariff if they were BRICS aligned was actually Lula, because obviously it was in Brazil and he's the one leading the BRICS Summit at the moment. But you see, Ramaphosa broke ranks. Everybody else had been quiet about it, but not Ramaphosa. He had to put his big foot in it. And he denounced the tariffs, calling them unwarranted, politically motivated, and aggressive. He claims that the move undermines global trade fairness and targets South Africa for its independent foreign policy. But you see, Ramaphosa, your foreign policy is not independent. You side with the world's worst regimes. This is known full well. In any case, apparently Ramaphosa called for an accelerated diplomatic negotiations to resolve the issues and protect local industries. Because yet again, as I said in my video yesterday, when Ramaphosa is against anything, if he's with the BRICS Summit, he's anti the West. If he's in the West, he's anti everybody else. He's a chameleon. He's whoever he needs to be for that environment. And so here we have him seeing full well that our economic interests are about to be severely hampered. And so what does he do? Well, he goes, well, let's see if we can do some negotiations. Well, these negotiations should have been done a very long time ago. They've had months and months and months to negotiate. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there is a lot of suggestion out there by fellow content creators and so forth that apparently this is the end of the road and these tariffs have just been issued and who knew this was all going to come, and it's just a big, huge slap in the face. And the reality is that's actually not true. Most people are not looking at the letter that South Africa got and analyzing it in the right way. Now, what's actually going on here is that the deadline to negotiate a trade agreement with the US has basically been extended to the 1st of August. We know that it was due to expire, I think, tomorrow. At the time of the release of this video will be today. That's the 9th of July. And the reality is there has been no agreement. So what this letter actually says is you are going to get a 30% tariff plus a potential of an additional 10% if you deem to be BRICS aligned and anti-Western or anti-American, as they may describe it. And so you better get onto it and start negotiating a deal. That's effectively what this does. Now, we all know what the potential consequence of this is. It's the rand weakening, which it already has because parties are anticipating that in typical fashion, the ANC couldn't negotiate a piss up at a brewery, so how the hell are they going to agree a trade agreement? Now, AGOA's benefits are definitely under threat. The likelihood of AGOA actually being extended, as we all know and we've all discussed, the answer at this point in time is probably not going to happen. And the potential here is that we are going to see job losses in export-heavy sectors, which will increase import costs and will have inflationary pressures. And I will talk about that quite a bit during my interview with Davi Roots on the weekend, which will be released on Saturday. So why did this actually happen? Well, it's because South Africa keeps cozying up with China, Russia, and Iran underneath the BRICS Plus umbrella. And as you know, many of these parties are hostile to US interests. Now, what we often see is South Africa will abstain from key UN votes, which allows Iran and Russia diplomatic expansion. And the US is looking at a lot of this going, yeah, the whole non-aligned status that South Africa says it's having is actually not non-aligned at all. It's actually deeply anti-Western, and they need to protect the US jobs and they need to protect US interests. So it's obvious from their perspective that they should be hostile back to South Africa, hostile back in the way that's easiest to do, which is economically. So the likely parties who are going to suffer from this are going to be metals, agriculture, and automotive parts. Now, whether or not they'll actually be able to agree, an agreement remains to be seen. But the problem that Ramaphosa has at the moment is that he's actually fighting battles from a number of fronts. So let's move on to the second part of this video today, which is actually around the police corruption scandals. Specifically, the arguments between the KZN Commissioner and obviously the Ministers for Police. Now, it does look at the moment like the ANC is telling Cyril Ramaphosa that this is a massive catastrophe and they need to deal with it urgently. According to Mbalula, they're not going to take sides, and any party convicted in wrongdoing must be held accountable. But you see, this becomes inevitably the problem in that we know that when it comes time to assign blame, the likelihood is it will be assigned to parties that, such as the Commissioner. ANC ministers or ANC members always go scot-free, and this is leading Ramaphosa into a very difficult position where he's got BRICS allegiances to balance. He's got the police corruption scandals. He's got fighting within his own party, which is going to push to have his own MPs, his own party members cleared. And then you've got external attacks from outside. You've got the police commissioner saying, I have proof of corruption. You have Donald Trump putting through forms of anti-Western tariffs on the country as a whole. And ultimately, Ramaphosa's at the end of the road. He doesn't know how to fight an ideological and an economic and a reputational battle all at once. It's becoming increasingly difficult. And so at the end of the day, what is he going to do? I mean, he faces economic isolation from the West. He could realign himself with the BRICS alliances, but there isn't the type of trade that would benefit the country through those partnerships that he would need. Because the reality is that all BRICS partners are all basically emerging economies. They're all struggling for relevance. They have populations that need jobs. They have populations that have aspirations. They're not first world or developed economies. And it's very difficult to go to China that has 2 billion people and say, we know you need to give your people jobs. You've got record numbers of youth unemployment, but why don't you give jobs to South Africa? They're going to laugh at you. I'd laugh at you. The reality is you've got economic sanctions being played out in Russia and Iran. Russia can't actually trade with a number of countries, and they have unemployment problems themselves, as does Iran. And you're going to go to them and say, please give us jobs in South Africa. It's stupid. Like, it's just not going to happen, is it? So you can have moral grandstanding, but when it comes through to domestic jobs and international trade, what's your leverage? You don't have any. You're a small tin pot country with problems at home of your own. And these problems, as we know, we have structural problems here in terms of the actual infrastructure here being degraded every day. We have foreign policy blunders left, right, and center that can't protect trade. We couldn't even get trade into the country because of onerous legislation like BE and other stupid laws. So at this point in time, what's he going to do? And the answer is there's nothing he can do, which is exactly why he broke ranks and bitched about it. He went and he said, well, he thought it was terrible of Donald Trump. He was the first BRICS partner to do it because he has issues at home and now he has issues abroad. And he has no way of solving these. Coming on to the next news article of today, and this is actually the news article relating to somebody very, very important in South Africa. And I say important because of what he actually does. And this is the story of Dr. Sooliman. So Dr. Sooliman, if you don't know who he is, he's actually the founder of the Gift of the Givers. He's Africa's largest NGO disaster relief organization, established in 1992 after quitting his medical career. So on the face of it, he's one of the good guys, right? Unfortunately, he's been linked to the African Muslim Party, which historically opposes gay rights and promotes Sharia-based principles, or policies, if you will. Now, he's come under fire because, you see, in an article written called Zion the City, he seems to constantly blend the idea of Zionism with that of a death cult. He basically says that the idea behind Zionism is just weaponized Jewish trauma. So this is Jewish individuals using the idea of Zionism, a homeland for themselves where they can protect themselves. And the reason that they'll cite that is because of historical injustices to Jewish individuals. Well, according to him, that's just weaponized Jewish trauma. It's not real. It's not real at all. Now, Tim Flack, who's an author, has suggested that the language used by Dr. Sooliman is deeply anti-Semitic and seems to want to erase the Jewish nationhood, rewrite history, and lacks any form of nuance or moral consistency. And Flack suggests that the constant condemnation of Israel itself and its war in Gaza seems to omit Hamas's atrocities and deploys false analogies of other global conflicts, collating them with Jewish conspiracies in order to say that, you know what, there's these wars elsewhere and it must be the Jews' fault, so who cares what happens to the Jews? Now, you see, this all causes great big problems because, you see, Dr. Sooliman has a humanitarian persona, but it is often suggested that he uses his platform, his profile, to vilify Israel and to equate Zionism with psychosis. Now, despite his positions on gay rights and Sharia-based legal systems, there is a problem in that Sooliman himself seems to have cultivated forms of media influence. And what that's meant is that there is reduced coverage now being given in the public sphere to critical views or critical positions of his views. In other words, anybody who wants to try to counter any of the statements or the positions that he takes, seems like those positions or those critiques of those positions are all being silenced. And this itself seems to be a degree of almost foreign influence and soft power on the media industry itself, with its origins actually coming through from Turkey and Qatar. These countries are obviously advancing narratives specifically through NGO operations in South Africa. And so Dr. Sooliman is actually being accused of having close alignment with those countries, the same countries that are portrayed as being backers of Hamas and Islamist networks. So the reality is what we potentially have here is an individual with a high public profile who seems to be using that public profile to push forward forms of anti-Semitic and pro-Islamist propaganda. So why has this actually all become really, really important? And that is because Sooliman has actually been appointed by Ramaphosa to lead the national dialogue. And so Ramaphosa is being accused of legitimizing an ideological actor and obviously undermining any form of Jewish concerns, prioritizing political optics over genuine inclusion. The basic problem being that yet again, we're seeing that South Africa's actual internal policy seems to be hijacked by forms of Islamists. That's the allegation being made. Now, we've already seen that in terms of South Africa's foreign policy, specifically with its anti-Israeli rhetoric. And here again, we're seeing it in terms of the national dialogue. Whether or not it's true or not, I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Anyway, until tomorrow, bye.
Apparently during some conversations between yourself, apparently you have alleged, we weren't here so I don't know you said it, but you've alleged to say speak English, or what's that effect?
Speak clearly.
Speak clearly.
No,
okay.
The gentleman's partially deaf.
Yeah, he can speak clearly.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even hear him.
No, and that's fine, and that's why we've just come to speak, because potentially someone could perceive that as a hate crime.
Did we just know this was going to happen?
No, I know.
People, you know, if someone says to me, officer, I believe this, then we need to look at it, because someone's potentially reporting to me.